Hi, Nige here from 3 Men and a Whisky. Just doing my intro video. I came to Sheffield in 1996, which is a long time ago now, and just never left. Came for uni and never went back. I'm originally from Lancashire, which means that I was being a bit of a traitor to move across the border. But hopefully, after all these years, they've forgiven me. Was very lucky in Sheffield at Sheffield Uni. I met a whole load of lifelong friends, including Pete and JD. Most of which I met through the Star Trek Society at the Sheffield Uni, which has probably become quite a legendary society now. And many of those people that I became close friends with through that society also went on to fall in love with whiskey as well. So who knew that whiskey and Star Trek would mix so well. I first got into whiskey in probably my early 20s. I actually started with, in terms of single malts, I actually started with Talisker, which is probably not the starting place for most people, and that was really through my brother-in-law who introduced me to it. There were probably two events that turned my interest in whiskey into something a bit more like an obsession, which was, first of all, I think around 2006, 2007, we went to our first whiskey tasting, a few of us. I think JD was the one who found it. And it was a Tullibardine whiskey tasting over in Derbyshire. And it just raised things to another level. You know, I was instantly hooked on how the same distillery could just produce such different spirit. Couple of things that I think show how long ago this was and how much the industry has changed. There was, I think, a 30 or 35-year-old bottle of whiskey that they had on that tasting. It was very reasonably priced, although I think still not affordable for any of us. You certainly wouldn't get that now. And the presenter was actually the master distiller for Tullibardine. Again, that's pretty rare these days, certainly for a relatively small UK-based tasting to get a master distiller. Normally they are travelling the world, opening new markets and doing mega events and things like that, which just shows how much the industry has exploded. The other event was in 2010 and was when I went over to Islay with JD, an event arranged by the Weedron Whiskey Shop over in Bakewell. And again, I'd never been to a distillery before, and this was suddenly us doing 9 distilleries in 4 days. We did Jura as well as the 8 as it was then that were on Islay, and it just blew me away. The whole event, the whole week blew me away. Particularly Bruichladdich, which again I'd had the occasional laddie, but I didn't really know that much about them. This was, I think, probably during their real peak, following their comeback after being closed down. Had some phenomenal whiskies there, but that trip also introduced me to the world of collecting as well, whiskey collecting and whiskey investment. I'd never really considered the idea of buying bottles of whiskey you don't open, but I bought my first 2. They're both from Bruichladdich, which I kept for a fair few years. And I don't do anywhere near as much collecting as I used to. There are a few bottles sitting upstairs gathering dust, but it's actually my wife, Holly, who has taken over taken on the mantle of whiskey collector. She's got all the collecting bottles these days. All of my whiskey now, all the stuff behind me is all for drinking. And there's quite a few unopened ones there, so I need to get a move on in these as the nights draw in over winter. Why 3 Men and a Whisky? Well, I mean, JD, Pete and I have been talking about doing a podcast for a while. We wanted to do something whiskey related, but we also wanted to do something that kind of captured our interests, our other interests as well. You know, we're all tremendous geeks. You know, we're well into our pop culture, and so the title 3 Men and a Whisky really came. I think it was JD who came up with it. Again, harks back to that. You know, that interest in 1980s in particular, pop culture. Interesting fact about Three Men and a Baby, the movie. It was actually directed, if you know that movie, directed by Leonard Nimoy, Mr. Spock from Star Trek. So you see, I will always find a way to get a Star Trek reference into pretty much anything. On that topic, my other interests, my geeky interests, movies and TV, probably the main bit. I was raised on science fiction, not just Star Trek, but obviously Star Wars as well. But things like old B movies, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, Invaders from Mars, Black Hole, Quatermass in the Pit, all those kinds of, B movie sci-fis, which I absolutely loved. Also TV shows like Battlestar Galactica, the 1970s version, Blake 7. I was never a massive Doctor Who fan, which might come as a surprise to some of my friends, but it never really did it for me in the same way. I think I was a bit more pulled into a lot of the American TV and film. Invasion of the Body Snatchers as well. Interesting fact: if you watch the 1970s version, which is the best version of all of the ones that have been made, Leonard Nimoy, Mr. Spock, is in that as well. He gets everywhere. Other stuff as well. It's not just sci-fi. I loved westerns. I still love westerns, particularly John Wayne, Clint Eastwood. Again, raised on a lot of that stuff from my dad, Sergio Leone stuff. But if there's a genre that is like my guilty pleasure, it's probably disaster movies. I absolutely love disaster movies. The good ones, the quality ones, Poseidon Adventure, Towering Inferno, etc., are great. But I also love the cheesy ones as well. The crazy, unrealistic, ludicrous ones like The Swarm or Meteor, or more recently things like The Core, and 2012, stuff like that. I just love disaster movies. So happy to talk about those at length. Bringing it back to the whiskey, I don't really have a favourite distillery. I mentioned Bruichladdich, obviously from the Islay tasting. That was one of my early distilleries that I really loved. And again, they used to do so many great and different bottlings. I love Glenallachie these days. Again, they're really experimental, doing lots of interesting things. I love a sherry bomb, Glenfarclas, Glendronach, anything that's kind of sherried. But yeah, I'm pretty, I've got pretty varied taste, really. And I'm loving what's happening with a number of the new distilleries. There's quite a lot of new distilleries out there. Quite a lot. There's absolutely hundreds, and probably too many. But some of them are doing some really exciting things, because they need to catch up. They need to catch up to the bigger distilleries, and so they're having to release spirit quite early. Certainly 3 or 4 years in, and they're experimenting and they're finding new ways to bring great flavors out. Some of the ones that I've been really impressed with, Lakes Distillery. I'm actually off to a tasting with them in a few days. They're doing some great stuff. I love their bottlings as well. I've actually not got one here, but they've got a great looking bottle. Wireworks, or White Peak Distillery, who make Wireworks, they are absolutely phenomenal. I've not had a bad bottle from them. I've got quite a few of those on my shelf. Soft spot for them as well because they're local. They're in Derbyshire, and so they come with a really nice story as well. And that again shows how things have changed in the industry. When I started drinking whiskey, English whiskey was, the punchline of many jokes. It really isn't anymore. It's some of the those distilleries I've mentioned are absolutely on par with any new distillery up in Scotland or anywhere else for that matter. Up in Scotland, I was really impressed with Ballinderloch, which I got to try a few days ago over at the Seven Hills Festival. That was amazing, to be honest. I'll definitely be picking one of those up at some point. quite like Lindor's Abbey as well. There's some interesting stuff there. They also have a great story, you know, and I do think because there's too many whiskey distilleries right now, that in my mind there's far too many that you could imagine surviving. I do think the ones that will make it big are the ones that obviously have a great spirit, a great dram, but that have a story as well. You know, something compelling, something that draws you in. You know, Lindor's Abbey certainly have that. I think, you know, White Peak Distillery certainly has that. So what's left? I'm going to try a whiskey. I thought it was only the, you know, right thing to do. Have a little taste of a whiskey, even though it is actually 11:35 in the morning. So this is probably naughty, but let's not tell anyone. What have I got? I have got something which I thought would hark back to my earlier days in loving whiskey. I've got myself a Bruichladdich, but it's not a Bruichladdich from them specifically. It is from the Wee Dram. It's a Wee Dram bottling. Just here, Erin's cask. Not a lot of it left, and I picked this one firstly because you know, Bruichladdich was the first distillery I fell in love with. And also because the Wee Dram whiskey shop is very much the place that has fueled my interest. You know, they're the ones that did all those tastings like Tullibardine and stuff back in the day. They were the ones who organised that trip to Islay. And look, they do some of their own bottlings as well. And it's not often you get to have a 16-year-old Bruichladdich that's so reasonably priced. And this one was fully matured for 16 years in a sherry hogshead, so should give me a little bit of that great sherry bomb flavour. Using my Norland glass. Different types of glasses are all the rage these days. I do love a Norland. It's good for nosing. Yeah, the sherry really comes through. You can tell it's a Bruichladdich. It's got that kind of saltiness, that Islay nose, a little bit of smoke, but not heavy smoke influence, because again, Laddie isn't generally heavily peated aside from a few bottlings. But no, a lot of like the dried fruits and things like that coming through. Ooh, yeah. Now the Bruichladdich really comes through, takes over from the sherry a little bit. That's awesome. That's perfect for a winter's night as the nights are drawing in. Absolutely gorgeous. Anyway, I think I've probably talked way too much already. Hopefully see you at some point. If you've got any questions, drop some comments on the video. Otherwise, yeah, live long and prosper. Or as they say up in Scotland, Slàinte mhath.